Now, if there is any patient of acute tonsillitis, by chance the patient has acute tonsillitis, I mean, we keep having no sore throat, we have pain in the throat. So, if it is being attributed to be because of tonsillitis, if it is once or twice, it is okay. What even if it is 3 or 4 or 5 times? How does it make a difference? Every time you have, even if you take antibiotics for 5 days, you will be fine. So is it something to be worried about if anybody is having recurrent infections, recurrent involvement of tonsils, recurrent infections of the tonsil? Is it something worrisome? Yes, it is. Why? Why? Because the more the times the patient is having acute infection of the tonsil, the more are the chances that this patient might land into complications which can occur following tonsillitis. So what can be the complications of tonsillitis? Tonsillitis can lead to complications. Yes, it can. And now you will only see that, yes, you know all of them. So what are the complications that can occur following tonsillitis? So there can be the infection from the tonsil which is going through the eustachian tube into the ear. There can be recurrent acute otitis media. When the infection goes laterally, that you tell me. Lateral, where it goes? Which space can it go? Yes, peritonsillar space. Can there be peritonsillar abscess? Yes. When it goes further laterally, parapharyngeal abscess. From the parapharyngeal space, below, submandibular abscess. Behind, retropharyngeal abscess. So there can be multiple deep neck space abscess. Deep neck space abscess like peritonsillar. There can be parapharyngeal, retropharyngeal. There can be submandibular. And yes, don't think that these never occur. They are very common. So if the patient's immunity, if the child's immunity is not very good, then they can occur just because of acute tonsillitis. So the more the episodes are, the more worrisome it becomes. So we cannot just ignore, no problem. Whenever you have, how many times you have, just take one Augmentin, you will be fine. Don't worry. So you have to notice how frequently the child is having. And can it be only these infective complications that the child can have following tonsillitis? There can be other complications also. Yes, like the patient can have a syndrome which is known as Limmer's syndrome. What is this? This usually follows tonsillitis or oropharyngeal infections. When we talk about oropharyngeal infections, we can think of what? Only tonsillitis, right? So this follows very commonly tonsillitis. And what is it all is this? Can you imagine? It is septic thrombosis of the internal jugular vein. The internal jugular vein has got thrombosed and there is septicemia in this patient. There is severe pain in the neck along with features of septicemia following tonsillitis, following an acute episode of tonsillitis. Yes, and this is a fatal complication. So this follows oropharyngeal infections, and this is septic thrombophlebitis. Phlebitis of internal jugular vein. Patient will have neck pain, tenderness over internal jugular vein, and patient will have features of septicemia. So if you do not immediately admit the patient and start IV antibiotics and manage this patient thinking of this in mind, believe me, you will lose this patient. Yes, and the more the chances of acute tonsillitis, the more the chances of complications. Also, there can be some non-infective complications. What can be the non-infective complications? Yes, the serious ones. There can be rheumatic fever. Yes, this is because of molecular mimicry. The bacterial proteins and the proteins of the heart, they are same. So when the immunity develops against the bacteria, this also destroys the heart valves. Yes, so there can be rheumatic fever. There can be type 3 hypersensitivity because of the streptococcus. Yes, so that is post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. PSGN. Yes, the type 3, the immune complex disease. Type 3 hypersensitivity. So can you just imagine that a tonsillitis leading to these conditions? Yes, not only this, in the heart it can also lead to subacute bacterial endocarditis. Yes, and also what it can lead to is when the tonsils are very hypertrophied, as I told you, that when there is any patient who has parenchymatous involvement, and if the patient goes into chronic stage, chronic tonsillitis, then what happens is that they remain hugely enlarged, and then what will happen is they will cause sleep apnea. What happens when there is sleep apnea? What is sleep apnea? Sleep apnea is when the patient is sleeping, when the child is sleeping, because of the obstruction of the airway, the brain is not getting proper oxygenation. So there is hypoxemia. Yes. So there is sleep apnea. Sleep apnea. What is that? There is hypoxemia, decreased oxygen. And this decreased oxygen, if it is for more than 10 seconds, then that is what we call as apnea. And more than 30 episodes in 7 hours of sleep, that is approximately more than 5 per hour apneas, is what we call as sleep apnea. Yes. So what happens when there are so many apneic episodes? Yes, the brain is not getting oxygenation. Yes, the child will be very, very sleepy all throughout the day. Yes, usually these patients, they have adenoid hypertrophy also. Yes, so the child will be very sleepy, will be lethargic. Not only that, in response to this hypoxemia, what is happening inside the body? What you are seeing outside is that the child is very lethargic, child is sleepy, and the child's growth is not appropriate. Yes, but what is happening inside? Because of hypoxemia, what is happening is that there is pulmonary vasoconstriction. Yes, and rest everywhere in the body. When there is decreased oxygen, what happens is vasodilatation. But except for in the pulmonary vasculature, there is pulmonary vasoconstriction. So that leads to pulmonary vasoconstriction. Pulmonary vasoconstriction. And this pulmonary vasoconstriction will lead to pulmonary hypertension. Pulmonary hypertension will affect the right side of the heart, leading to right-sided heart failure, which is known as cor pulmonale. Cor pulmonale. So can you see a tonsillitis leading to such major complications? There can be deep neck space abscesses. There can be these complications of the heart, of the kidney, of even heart failure. Yes. And yes, there can be little small complications also which are not very worrisome. Yes, which are these? The patient can have, because of repeated infection, there can be blockage of the crypt, the opening of the crypt, and that can lead to the collection of the crypt and inspission of all the calcium and the calcium crystals in the secretions, leading to stone formation. That is known as tonsil stone or tonsillar lith. Or if the crypt has just got obstructed, then the secretions inside can lead to the formation of something which is known as a cyst, that is known as a tonsillar cyst. Tonsillar cyst. These pictures can be shown to you and they can be asked at what they are. So yes, that is tonsillar lid. This is tonsillar cyst. Tonsillar cyst. Also, the patient will not be very acutely infected, and the patient will not have these deep neck abscesses, but the patient can go into a chronic stage of chronic tonsillitis where the patient is continuously having discomfort in the throat, a foreign body sensation in the throat. Patient is having continuous, he will hawk, he will like that, he will continuously clear his throat. Yes, these are the features when we call that the patient has chronic tonsillitis. Yes, so the patient can have deep neck space abscesses in response to tonsillitis. Patient can have the complications because of immunological response to this bacteria, like rheumatic fever. Patient can have glomerulonephritis. Patient can have, because of obstruction of airway, sleep apnea, heart failure. Yes, patient can have chronic tonsillitis. So what is chronic tonsillitis? Chronic tonsillitis, I told you, is that chronically the tonsil is little infected and there is discomfort in the throat. But when we see the tonsil, how do we know? What are the features that will tell us that this is a chronic tonsillitis? Yes. So chronic tonsillitis, there are 3 features, which means that if the patient has come to you and he's telling you that always my throat is irritable, there's discomfort in the throat. And right now when the patient has come to you, you do not see acute infection of the tonsil. He tells you, I have repeated infections, I have repeated infection of the tonsil. How do you know that this patient, what he's talking about, the repeated infection, is actually a tonsillitis, and it is not just an episode of pharyngitis that he's talking about? Yes. So what are the features that you will see in the tonsil which will make you feel that yes, this is a patient of chronic tonsillitis? So there are 3 features. First is, can you see here that the anterior pillars appear very hyperemic? Yes. So there is the anterior pillars appear hyperemic. Second is when you press the anterior pillar, you can see cheesy material oozing out of the tonsil, of the tonsillar crypts. Yes. So second is on compression, there is expression of cheesy material. Cheesy material from the tonsil, and this is what is known as Irwin-Moore sign. This is known as Irwin-Moore sign. Yes. And the third is enlarged jugulodigastric or upper deep cervical lymph node. Enlarged upper deep cervical lymph node. Yes. So which means that if any patient has repeated episodes of acute tonsillitis, if any child has repeated episodes of acute tonsillitis, even if the child has not developed any of these complications till now, there are chances that the child might develop. So that is why it is a cause of concern. So that is a very important place where we need to take a call that whether we should operate the tonsil, we should remove the tonsil or not. Yes. So usually whenever there is acute tonsillitis, we can just give antibiotics, analgesics, patient will be fine. But if there are recurrent repeated episodes, then we need to think, we need to take a call that should we remove the tonsil? Should we go for a tonsillectomy? Yes. So what are the points that will tell you that yes, go for a tonsillectomy in this patient? So what are the indications of tonsillectomy? So the most important indication of tonsillectomy are the infectious indications, out of which recurrent episodes of tonsillitis is the most important indication. Yes. So that is according to Paradise criteria. What is the criteria when we should think of going for tonsillectomy? Yes, if there is more than 3 episodes of tonsillitis per year for 3 consecutive years. Okay, now when the years go down, episodes will go up. Yes, so more than 5 episodes per year for 2 consecutive years, or more than 7 episodes in 1 year. Is it clear? So if the patient has 7 episodes of acute tonsillitis in 1 year, go for tonsillectomy. 5 episodes in 1 year, wait for another year and see. Yes. So 5 episodes per year for 2 consecutive years, go for tonsillectomy. Yes. Or 3 episodes per year, then watch for 3 years. 3 episodes per year for 3 consecutive years, then you go for tonsillectomy. This is the most important indication. Now, what can be the other indication? Now, if the patient has developed peritonsillar abscess, okay, so even if this patient for the first time is developed acute tonsillitis, but the patient is having peritonsillar abscess, yes, or if maybe the patient has had only acute tonsillitis maybe once in a year or twice in a year earlier, but now the patient has come to you with peritonsillar abscess, already 1 deep neck space abscess has occurred. Yes, we will not wait. What we will do now is we will go for tonsillectomy. So peritonsillar abscess is a very important indication for tonsillectomy. If there is a single episode in a child, go for tonsillectomy. In adults, you can wait for 2 episodes. So 2 episodes in adult, single episode in child, and 2 episodes in adults. Yes. Now, another infective complication is chronic tonsillitis. If the patient has chronic tonsillitis, what are the features of chronic tonsillitis? What are the features of chronic tonsillitis? What you will look and you will say that yes, chronic tonsillitis. Yes, flushing of anterior pillars, hyperemia, or it is known as flushing of anterior pillars. Yes, so we can write it like that also, hyperemic, or we can say flushed anterior pillars. Yes, flushing of anterior pillars. Yes, Irwin-Moore sign and enlarged upper deep cervical lymph node. Now, there can be some non-infectious indications also, the most important of which is a huge enlarged tonsil leading to symptoms of sleep apnea. Yes, so the non-infectious complications, the most important is sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea. Sleep apnea. Yes. So for that, to see whether the child has obstructive sleep apnea or not, the size of the tonsils has been graded according to the Friedman score. So what is that score? Score is 0 is no tonsils. No tonsils means surgery has been done. 1 is this one. You cannot see the tonsils. They are present, but they are within the pillars. So when you will retract the pillar, you will be able to see. So they are within the pillars. Tonsil is within pillars. This is 2. What is 2? What is 2? This is 2 here. What is 2? You can see the tonsil that has come out of the pillar. So this is outside the pillar. Outside the pillars. This is 3. What is 3? 3 is that the tonsil has reached 3/4 to the midline. 3/4 distance to the midline it has reached. So 3 is 3/4. 3/4 to midline. And see the 4. The 4. 4 is both of them. Both the tonsils are touching in midline. 4 is the one that is touching in midline. Touching in midline. Right? So if the child has sleep apnea and if you see a grade 3 or more important a grade 4, then you need to think that yes, this sleep apnea in the child can be because of this hypertrophic tonsil. Yes, so that is again another indication for tonsillectomy. Now there can be some relative indications. The relative indications are carriers of streptococcus and diphtheria. And again, when I told you the anatomy, when we did the anatomy of the tonsil, when I told you that the bed of tonsil is very important. Why the bed is important? Why it is asked in your exam? Because tonsillectomy is also done as an approach to approach certain structures which are present in the bed. Tell me 2. I have already told you. 2 structures which we want to approach. We first remove the tonsil. Yes, very good. Styloid process. So one, when we have an enlarged styloid process is enlarged and calcified. That is what we call as Eagles syndrome. Eagles syndrome. Yes. So usually the styloid process, yes, we know where is the styloid process. The styloid process is here. Yes, it is. Usually it is, or if you see the X-ray, lateral view, you are not able to visualize the styloid process coming up till the tonsillar bed from here like that. Yes, but if it is enlarged, if it is usually more than 2 to 3 centimeters, which is considered to be the normal size. Now just see here. I don't know whether you are able to appreciate or not. I will draw what this I am seeing here. The styloid process is being seen from here to here. Yes, so it is projecting into the tonsillar fossa here also. Yes, let me see where it is. It is like this. See, till here, from here till here it is coming. Yes, so when you are seeing the enlarged styloid process, this is what is known as the Eagles syndrome. It is known as the Eagles syndrome. And when we have to remove this styloid process, how we remove it is we first do a preliminary tonsillectomy, and then in the tonsillar bed we can see this projection, which we can feel it very nicely. We just remove the muscles over it and we remove the styloid process. We go for a styloidectomy. Also, when we have to approach the glossopharyngeal nerve, I told you glossopharyngeal nerve, you tell me, glossopharyngeal nerve enters the pharynx in between these two muscles. Yes, in between superior and middle constrictor, here will enter the glossopharyngeal nerve. It will go up and it will supply the tonsil through the lower pole. So, if the patient has glossopharyngeal neuralgia, patient has very severe pain in the distribution of the glossopharyngeal nerve. So, if I tell you very severe pain in the distribution of glossopharyngeal nerve, can you tell me where is the pain? Yes, glossopharyngeal nerve gives sensory supply to what? To the oropharynx. Does it supply the ear also? Yes or no? Yes, ear also. So patient will tell, I have pain deep in the ear, and patient has pain. Whenever the patient swallows, he has very severe pain. Yes. So you first give this patient medical management. Medical management with carbamazepine is given. If the patient does not benefit, then you have to go for glossopharyngeal neurectomy. Again, you will approach the glossopharyngeal nerve through the tonsillar bed. So you will have to first remove the tonsil. Just lateral root tonsil is which muscle? Superior constrictor. So just from the lower pole, you will see this nerve coming up. That is where you transect it. It is done for glossopharyngeal neuralgia. And also whenever you see an asymmetric enlargement of the tonsil, asymmetric enlargement of tonsil, we know it is a component of the Walde's ring, right? Yes. So whenever there is asymmetric enlargement of the tonsil, what is the thing that should come to your mind? Yes, always rule out a lymphoma. Lymphoma. Yes, that can involve the extranodal site to be involved. Very commonly is the tonsil. So for ruling out whether it is a lymphoma or not, we never take a punch biopsy. What we do is we have to take the complete architecture of the tonsil we need to see. For that, we need to go for a complete tonsillectomy. So tonsillectomy also has to be done whenever we want to rule out malignancy, whenever we want to rule out lymphoma. So quickly now you are going to tell me, when will you think of going for tonsillectomy? Yes, when will you think of going for tonsillectomy? What are the indications of tonsillectomy? Yes, tell me the most important indications. Yes, they are the infectious indications because they can lead to deep neck abscesses. Yes, so how recurrent should be the episodes? When you think that I should go for tonsillectomy, this can lead to deep neck abscesses, this can lead to heart complication, renal complication. Yes, so recurrent episodes, how recurrent? More than 3 per year for 3 consecutive years, more than 5 per year for 2 consecutive years, more than 7 in a single year. Okay, is peritonsil abscess an indication for tonsillectomy? Yes. How many episodes in a child? Single episode. In an adult? 2 episodes. Yes. Is chronic tonsillitis an indication for tonsillectomy? Yes. Can you do tonsillectomy in a patient of enlarged tonsils, because of which the patient is having sleep apnea? Is that also an indication of tonsillectomy? Yes, that is an indication, that is an obstructive indication of tonsillectomy. And whenever there is sleep apnea, many times, what happens is that even if you remove the tonsil, the response will not be very good in some patients where the base of tongue area is very bulky. This usually happens in adults. In adults, this base of who are very obese, what happens is that this base of tongue area is very bulky. So the oropharynx appears very congested. We have the huge tonsils here. We have the base of tongue which is very bulky. So whenever the patient lies down, he is overweight, he is obese. So whenever the patient lies down, all this falls back and it closes his airways. Yes, so in those patients, only a tonsillectomy does not work. In those patients, what we have to do is we also have to remove the soft palate also to give that oropharynx a space from where the air can go. So just see here. Yes, can you see here? The tonsils have been removed. Here the tonsils were. Tonsils are removed. The uvula has been removed here. Uvula has been removed. Yes, and the anterior and the posterior pillar, they are sutured together so that this oropharynx becomes a little spacious so that air can go. And this surgery is what is known as UPPP. UPPP. What is UPPP? It is palato pharyngoplasty. Yes, so is tonsillectomy an indication for UPPP? Yes or no? Yes. You have to do tonsillectomy also. So is tonsillectomy done for snoring? Yes. Is it done for sleep apnea? Yes. Is it done in UPPP? All these are the same. So whenever there is sleep apnea because of enlarged tonsil, because of obstruction, because of the size of the tonsil, we go for tonsillectomy. And one of the surgery which is usually in adults who have a bulky oropharyngeal area, that is UPPP. What are the structures that you can approach after doing a tonsillectomy? What are the structures in the tonsillar bed that you can approach after doing a tonsillectomy? Yes, the styloid process, the glossopharyngeal nerve. When the styloid process is enlarged and calcified, what do we call that as? That is known as Eagle's syndrome, styalgia or Eagle's syndrome. Eagle's syndrome or styalgia. Pain because of enlarged calcified styloid process. So now we have seen that yes, if tonsillitis is acute and just once or twice, that is perfect. Okay, everybody will have it. We can just give antibiotics. That is perfect. If the appearance of the tonsil is like of the membranous tonsillitis, then we need to rule out other things also. Very important things. Yes. And if the child has recurrent tonsillitis, if the patient has recurrent tonsillitis, then just giving antibiotics does not suffice. Give the antibiotic when there is an acute episode, but take a call whether you should go for a tonsillectomy or not, because tonsils, acute tonsillitis, recurrent episodes can lead to multiple complications. Even a single episode can lead to multiple complications, but the more the infection, the more the frequency of infection is, the chances that this child will develop these complications increases. So why let the child develop all these complications? Remove the tonsil. Yes, so then we go for tonsillectomy. So now let us quickly see how we do a tonsillectomy. Now before going for a tonsillectomy, you always need to be very cautious and rule out certain things. First, at the time when you are posting the surgery, this is a patient who has recurrent tonsillitis, no? So it should not be that one day earlier the patient develops acute tonsillitis and next morning patient has come for the surgery and you think that anyway we have posted the surgery, let us do. No. At that time of acute infection, surgery should not be done. This is not a condition that if today you will not do, the child will die tomorrow. So you should not do it whenever there is acute infection. There are increased chances of hemorrhage, increased chance of septicemia. So always before doing the surgery, you have to rule out acute infection. Acute infection. This is a surgery where tonsil is a very vascular area. We saw that so many multiple arteries. We also saw that just lateral to the capsule of tonsil, we have the paratonsillar vein. Chance of hemorrhage is very high here following surgery. So that is why you have to be very sure that this child does not have a bleeding diastasis. Yes, bleeding diastasis. Rule out a bleeding diastasis. In fact, that is something that we rule out in any surgery, no? Bleeding diastasis. And specifically, you have to see that the hemoglobin should be more than 10. Okay, so this is one surgery where you have to be very specific that no, hemoglobin has to be more than 10 only, then you will operate. And again, one contraindication which holds no significance nowadays, but still is asked in your exam and asked by your examiners, polio epidemic. Polio epidemic. Why this is, polio has been eradicated now, but still why your examiners ask you, and it is something like the COVID pandemic, how we had. So earlier days, there used to be epidemics of polio, pandemics of polio. So that is so much ingrained in their mind that they still keep asking you this polio epidemic, like how this COVID will never go out of us in our mind. Yes. So this is why in polio epidemic, this tonsillectomy was not done, they ask you. Yes. So polio epidemic, what happens is that, yes, this is an airborne infection. So the child, in the child's tonsil, that's the lymphoid tissue present in the oropharynx, the site of entry of the air and the pathogens. So there the poliovirus will go and it will get inhabited. It will go and colonize, right? Now in this child, by chance you have, during that epidemic, everybody will have the reservoir of infection there in the oropharynx. Now, if in this particular child you go for a tonsillectomy, what have you done? You have created the raw area. You have given access for that virus which was present there, which was inhabiting there, which was colonizing there, to get access to the vessels and the nerves. So that can precipitate a paralytic polio. That is why it was never done. So during polio epidemics, which were very common in earlier days, any tonsillectomy was never done. So now we know when we have to go for tonsillectomy and what are the things that we will see before going for tonsillectomy, which will be a deterrent that no, we should not go for tonsillectomy in this child right now. Yes. And now let us see how this surgery is done. So for this surgery, the position that is this position, which is known as the Rose's position. Why this position? Yes, this is the same position for adenoidectomy also. We are going to operate on this area, right? So whenever we operate on this area, we know this area, if the bleeding occurs, it will immediately go down into the larynx, into the airways. So what we want is, we want the larynx to be at a higher level than this area where we are operating. So we place a pillow below the shoulders of the patient so that his cervicothoracic joint is extended, and we extend the neck also at the atlanto-occipital joint. So this is extension at two joints. First is the cervicothoracic joint, or you can call it a cervical joint, cervicothoracic joint, and second is at the atlanto-occipital joint. Yes, a ring also can be placed here, definitely to stabilize the head. Yes, so still that will be the Rose's position only. So now when you have placed this, can you tell me that Rose's position is done for which other surgery? Yes, it is done for tonsillectomy, for adenoidectomy, and also for tracheostomy. For these three, we go for the Rose's position. Now, you have placed a patient in this position. Where are we going to operate? We are going to operate in the oropharynx, for which we need the mouth to be open, right? So, we need the mouth to be open. What is the instrument that we use to keep the mouth open? Is this instrument? Yes, exactly. This is the same instrument that we are using to keep the mouth open, what we were using for adenoidectomy also, because adenoid also we are approaching through the oropharynx behind the palate. We go into the nasopharynx, right? So here, this instrument is what is known as Davis mouth gag, and this is what is known as the Boyle's tongue blade. Together we call it as Boyles-Davis mouth gag. And whenever an examiner is giving you some instrument to choose, to pick up, yes, if you're picking up these instruments, then make it sure that each and every word of what I've told you in this lecture about the tonsil and before that, you know, because all your viva will then go on these things about tonsillectomy, about infections of tonsils, indication, contraindication, complications, everything. Yes. So, and yes, these instruments are likely to be asked in your exams also, because every year nowadays we are being asked something about the tonsils and tonsillectomy, this being one of the most common surgeries done in ENT. So when they are articulated together, this is how they are fitted together. The tongue blade is fitted into the Davis here. This is to retract the teeth up. When they are put into the mouth, this is like this. This is the Davis and this is the Boyle's, and this is when it is pulled, the mouth is open. Now here we can see that the surgeon is standing at the head end and the surgeon is holding the instrument. So if the surgeon holds the instrument with one hand, he has only one hand to operate now. Whereas we need the suction and we need the operating instrument to be in one hand, we need the suction in the other hand. We need both our hands free. So to make the hands free, what we use is a Draffin's bipod. What is this Draffin's bipod? This is known as Draffin's bipod stand. Draffin's bipod stand. Yes, so just see here. Yes, just see here. This Boyles-Davis mouth gag is fitted here. Okay, so that the surgeon does not have to hold. This is doing the function of holding it very tightly there, so that this will not move also, and it will not come out of the mouth, and the mouth will automatically close in the middle of the surgery. So now the setup is done. So now you are all set to go and operate on the tonsils. So now that you're all set, the instrument that you will use for tonsillectomy can be varied. Earlier there used to be only one method where the incision was given with the knife and the dissection used to be done and the tonsil used to be removed. Yes, since the chance of bleeding following the surgery are very, very high, nowadays we have better methods where cutting and coagulation is done at the same time. Chance of hemorrhage following tonsillectomy is very, very little. So depending upon the instrument that is being used, the tonsillectomy can be divided into a hot method or a cold method. What is the meaning of hot or cold? Cold method means where heat is not being produced to cut the tonsil, whereas hot method means that heat is being produced by the instrument to cut the tonsil. For example, yes, if you are using the knife to cut and then you are dissecting the tonsil from the loose areolar tissue lateral to the capsule, so will this be a hot or a cold method? Here you're just giving an incision with a knife, so this is known as cold knife. Why it is known as cold knife? Don't think that you are putting it in the fridge and then taking it out to operate. Cold knife because it is not producing heat. Now if you are using this instrument, can you identify this instrument? This is microdebrider. Yes, this is something like, you can imagine it like a shaver which has a sharp blade at its tip and which rotates very fast and it eats up all the tissue. So will this be cold or hot? Yes, this is a cold method. This is a harmonic scalpel. It vibrates at a very, very high speed and that is used to cut the tonsil and coagulate also. Yes, this is again a cold method. This is scalpel. Yes. So this is again a cold method. Now here what we are using is cautery. Yes, cautery. Either a bipolar or unipolar can be used. Tell me it is hot or cold? Cautery, we know it burns. Yes, so this is a hot method. hot method. And what is this? Yes, I will show you the instrument first. Instrument is this. What is this? Yes, this is the coablator wand. Coablator wand. Yes, what is this? What it does is it cuts and coagulates. It coagulates and ablates at the same time. So this is a very nice method to remove the tonsil. The chances of blood loss are very, very less. Yes, so this is how this appears, the tonsillar fossa appears when you go for cutting as well as coagulating with the help of coblation. Yes, so to summarize the techniques for tonsillectomy, we have the cold method, we have the cold knife, we have microdebrider, harmonic scalpel and the cryosurgery, and the hot methods are cautery, coblation and laser. Yes, it is asked which of the following are the hot methods, which of the following are the cold methods for tonsillectomy. So now let us quickly have a look at the video of tonsillectomy being done using a coblation wand. So here we are going to do a tonsillectomy with the help of coblation. Now let me orient you first. The surgeon is sitting at the head end of the patient. That is why everything must be appearing to you upside down. This there is the uvula. That is the uvula. This is the tonsil, the anterior pillar of the right side, and that you can see the tonsil of the right side. Now what is being held is the left tonsil that is being pulled medially, and we are going to start from the upper pole, right? So that is the upper pole and that is the lower pole of the left tonsil. So the tonsil is being pulled medially, and now with the help of coblation, the incision is given and the tonsil will be dissected out from a plane just lateral to the capsule of the tonsil. So in the loose areolar tissue, from the loose areolar tissue lateral to the capsule of the tonsil, the whole of the tonsil along with the capsule will be removed, and we can see that this instrument is cutting as well as causing coagulation at the same time, because of which there is hardly any bleeding. This is a very, very effective, very safe method of removing the tonsil with hardly any bleeding. So the dissection was started from the upper pole, and we can see that it has been removed from the up till the lower pole. The dissection has reached. And lateral to this capsule, we know is the loose areolar tissue. Lateral to that is the superior constrictor muscle. And we can hardly see any bleeding here. Yes, only the lower pole is left now. The lower pole is last to be dissected, last to be cut. And this removes the tonsil very, very quickly, coblation. So we can see that complete tonsil of both the sides we have removed on the other side also. And the tonsillar fossa is inspected, and any bleeding anywhere is coagulated. Still the hemostasis is achieved, and we can pack this tonsillar fossa for some time and visualize after some time whether complete hemostasis has been achieved or not. So we just saw the tonsillectomy being done by using the coblation wand. Now here the rest of the procedure remains the same for whatever instrument you are using, only the instrument changes, which means that in all tonsillectomy, the position of the patient, the initial preparation of mouth opening and everything will be the same. When you have to hold the tonsil and pull it medially, that also will be the same. Next, whether you use a knife, whether you use a microdebrider, whether you use a coblation wand, that will be the only difference. You will reach from the upper pole till the lower pole and dissect the lower pole last, right? So the instrument that is used to pull the tonsil medially is what is known as the Dennis Brown forceps. This is a very common instrument that is given to you. And how do you identify it? Always the jaws are blunt. Jaws are blunt. You can just feel the jaws and you will know that it is blunt. It is not sharp. It will not cut through the tonsillar tissue. Yes, jaws are blunt. It will just hold it and you can use it to pull it medially. And also always note that can you note that they are different in size? Yes, so the jaws are of different size. The upper jaw, you can just say one jaw is bigger than the other, is bigger than the lower, is bigger. One jaw is bigger than the lower one. And then if you are going for a dissection and snare method, which was the earliest method, which was the one that we have always grown up seeing, the dissection and snare method. What is that? That is that you have given the incision with the knife, and then the dissection that you're doing is with the help of this instrument. This is what is known as the Mollison tonsil dissector. The Mollison tonsil dissector, this part is the part with which you will dissect out the tonsil from lateral to the capsule, which means that you will remove the tonsil from the loose alar tissue. In the loose alar tissue lateral to capsule of tonsil, you are going to do the dissection. And once you have removed the tonsil, when you have reached the lower pole, what you do is you use an instrument like this. This is known as Eve's tonsillar snare. What is this? This is a snare. So this has a wire on its tip. Can you see this wire? It has a wire. This wire is attached to the tip, and when the lower pole is used, nowadays we have cautery, nowadays we have coblation, we can just cut and we can just coblate and we can remove the whole tonsil. But all the arterial supply, most of it comes from the lower pole. So we had to be very careful that we do not just cut the lower pole and let it bleed. So what was used was this instrument. This used to crush the lower pole and then cut it. Crush and cut it so that hemostasis is achieved and the lower pole does not bleed. So this is a very common instrument that is asked in your exam. And once you have removed the tonsil, again you use this instrument, the Mollison tonsil dissector anterior pillar retractor. This area looks like this. So this is used to retract the anterior pillar, because we know that tonsil is present in between the two pillars. So anterior pillar hides the view of the tonsillar fossa. So you will retract the tonsillar fossa, anterior pillar, from everywhere to visualize whether any area is bleeding or not. Now usually the tonsillectomy that we do for infective conditions is the tonsillectomy, where, as I showed you, the whole of the tonsil along with the capsule is removed from the bed of the tonsil. Yes. That is what is known as an extracapsular tonsillectomy. Now I will write it down. First, just understand this. Now suppose here is a child who is not having repeated episodes of infection. Okay, but the child has a very huge tonsil, a grade 4 Friedman score tonsil touching in midline, and that is leading to sleep apnea. So in this child, we think that why remove the complete tonsil? Tonsil has immunological function. It helps in immunity. Yes. When it is not repeatedly getting infected, only the size is a problem. Why remove the whole tonsil? Leave behind some lymphoid tissue. That will give immunity also. So in that case, what we do is we remove only some part of the parenchyma of the tonsil and we leave behind some part along with the capsule. The part that is near to the capsule we leave behind. If this is the tonsil here, so we will dissect this much part, this much we will remove, and this much we will leave behind. This is what is known as intracapsular tonsillectomy. So tonsillectomy can be extracapsular, where you remove the tonsil plus capsule, the whole of tonsil is removed. Whole of tonsil removed. Yes, and intracapsular, this is also known as tonsillotomy. So here what we do is a part of tonsillar tissue plus capsule is left behind. Now I told you that this is one of the most common surgeries that we do in ENT. What makes it more important? We do it on children, and you know that for parents, the most important to them is their children. Yes. So we have to be very, very well versed with what can be the complications that can occur following surgery and how to pick them up very early and how to manage them. So again, that is something which is asked from you very commonly in your exams. Yes. So what can be the complications following surgery? The one and the only complication that you need to remember very nicely following surgery is hemorrhage following tonsillectomy. So that is the most important complication following tonsillectomy, and that is hemorrhage. And the most common cause of hemorrhage that you can tell me, yes, that is venous or arterial hemorrhage. That is venous from external palatine vein. External palatine vein, also known as external palatine vein, is also known as paratonsillar vein. Paratonsillar vein, we have seen where it is, right? In the loose alar tissue lateral to capsule of tonsil, paratonsillar vein. And the tonsil, if during the surgery, like once you have operated, you have removed the tonsil and you see that the fossa is bleeding, that is what is known as primary hemorrhage. Primary hemorrhage means during surgery. During surgery, the patient is still under GA and you are inspecting and you are seeing that the patient is bleeding is not stopping. That is primary hemorrhage. Now, if the patient starts bleeding after surgery to within 24 hours, within 24 hours after surgery. That is what we call as reactionary. Yes, why this occurs is you have ligated something or you have cauterized, so there can be a slippage of ligature, or there can be a clot which is formed earlier and it has got dislodged now. Why there are chances of getting dislodged after surgery? Yes, because this is a surgery where bleeding occurs. So usually this is done in hypotensive anesthesia. The anesthesia that is given here is the blood pressure of the child is maintained at a lower level. So following surgery, when the blood pressure comes back to normal, then there are chances that there can be dislodgement of clot, there can be slippage of ligature. So that can lead to reactionary hemorrhage. And secondary, the name tells you secondary is secondary to infection. Yes, so this is anything after 24 hours up till 10 days. From 24 hours to 10 days, and infection takes some time to build up. So it occurs usually at 5 to 6 days. 5 to 6 days after surgery. So if there is any hemorrhage, you have to be first on a lookout. Following tonsillectomy, you have to be very careful. You have to keep this in mind that this child is at a risk of developing hemorrhage. That can be reactionary after surgery. Yes, so that can be reactionary, that can be secondary also. So you have to be very vigilant. How will you be very vigilant? And what is the position that you will place the child in, that by chance there is reactionary hemorrhage, the child does not aspirate? Yes, that is the position which you already know. That is, yes, the recovery position that we usually place after GA, or it is also known as the coma position following any trauma. That is how you place the patient. What is that position? Yes, this is what is the recovery position or the coma position. Here what you do is you make the patient first lie on the left. Yes, turn to the left, and both the hands have to be away from the chest so that the lung expansion can occur. So one hand, the left, is below, and here this is also placed above the chest, and the right leg is crossed over the left. Now in this position, the chances of aspiration into the lung is very less. So this is the position that we place the child, and after placing the child in this position, we will also always look for whether there is bleeding or not. How will we look for bleeding? The child is under GA, the surgery was done. So after the child comes out of GA, we have seen how the patients are. For 4 to 6 hours, they are just sleeping. So how are we going to note the child? And this is in the bleeding will be in the mouth, everything. The child will swallow inside. You will not come to know unless and until there is so much of blood in the stomach and the child vomits out, and maybe at that time so much of bleeding has already occurred. So how will we notice? What is important is that when we know that this can be a complication, when we are vigilant, we should be able to pick it up early. So what we have to notice is the swallowing movements. If the swallowing movements are excessive, it means that why is the child swallowing so much? Yes, so it means that the bleeding is occurring, and also you also have to regularly monitor the vitals. If the bleeding will occur, the vitals will change. Yes, the heart rate will go up. So you have to monitor the vitals. So in the post-operative, the position has to be the recovery position, or it is also known as coma position. You have to watch for swallowing movements. So now you are very vigilant, and in this child you have been able to find out the child is having excessive swallowing movements. The child is spitting out blood. The child is not supposed to spit blood. Yes, spitting out blood. The vitals are deranged. Yes, so your suspicion is high, might be there is hemorrhage, and you know and you examine, and yes, there is hemorrhage. So if it is a primary hemorrhage during surgery, how you manage? If it is a secondary hemorrhage is what? Secondary hemorrhage is because of secondary to infection. So there you start the antibiotics, IV antibiotics first. If not managed, then what you do? And if it's a reactionary hemorrhage, how you manage, right? So for all the management, if you have to manage, what you do is, and the first thing is that the patient has to be under GA. So if it is a primary hemorrhage, patient is already under GA. If it is a reactionary hemorrhage, you have to take the patient to the OT again. You don't have to just think that let me try to do something here in the ward itself. No, you have to anesthetize again. A GA has to be given. And if it is a reactionary hemorrhage, you have given antibiotics and IV antibiotics not responding, again you will have to go for a GA. And then what should be the procedure is The first step is removal of clot. Yes, why do we remove clot? Yes, only two places, here as well as in uterus, we remove the clot. Why? For contraction to occur and bleeding to stop. Now, why we remove the clot here is, now just try to understand, this is the fossa, right? In the fossa, there is a clot sitting here like this. So, when the contraction occurs, the contraction will not be proper. Why? The clipping action of the muscle will not be proper because of the clot. So now when we remove the clot, now the clipping action of the muscle will be proper, and maybe that suffices just to stop the blood. So the first step is removal of clot. You have removed the clot, still bleeding. Then what you do is you give pressure with a vasoconstrictor pack, vasoconstrictor gauze or a cotton which is soaked in vasoconstrictor. You put pressure. It is a venous bleeding, right? So you put pressure with a vasoconstrictor pack. So pressure with vasoconstrictor pack. Okay. If still bleeding, then you go for ligation, or you can go for cautery. And yes, this step for management of hemorrhage following tonsillectomy. So now quickly tell me, what is the position in which you do tonsillectomy? What's the position of the patient? Is that the Rose's position? Okay, what are the hot methods for tonsillectomy? Hot methods are coblation. Is microdebrider hot or cold? Microdebrider is cold. Knife, dissection and snare method is a cold method. Cautery is hot. Laser is hot method. Harmonic scalpel is a cold method. Yes, coblation is a hot method. Okay, what is the things that you need to be watchful following surgery? How will you place the patient in? Which position? Recovery position. What do you have to look for? What are the indications that will tell you that this patient is bleeding? Yes, excessive swallowing movement, spitting out of blood, vitals deranged. Yes, so if this is, how will you manage a hemorrhage following tonsillectomy? The most common complication following tonsillectomy is hemorrhage. Most common cause of hemorrhage following tonsillectomy is hemorrhage from venous or arterial? Venous. Which vein? External palatine vein, also known as paratonsillar vein. Yes, so what is the primary hemorrhage? Primary hemorrhage is during surgery. What is reactionary? Reactionary is after surgery to within 24 hours. What is hemorrhage after 2 hours? Known as 2 hours. Reactionary. After 2 days, 2 days is secondary. What is the most common cause of secondary hemorrhage? Secondary to infection. Most common time at which secondary hemorrhage occurs is at 5 to 6 days. Okay, so if there is hemorrhage following tonsillectomy, how will you manage this patient? First step is removal of clot. Second step, yes, you are going to put pressure with vasoconstrictor pack. Third step, not benefited, then you cauterize or you ligate. And all this, can you do it under local anesthesia? No, all this has to be under GA, right? So you have to first go for a GA, and then you have to inspect the area properly and go for this stepwise. Now you have done a tonsillectomy, patient is absolutely perfect, and you are inspecting the patient, and what you are seeing on the second day, on the third day, on the fourth day, you are seeing appearance like this in the tonsil. Like this in the tonsil. Something to worry about? Or is it normal? This is perfectly normal. You have created a raw surface all over the tonsillar bed, just lateral to the tonsil. Yes, you have removed the tonsil. You have done so much of dissection there. So this is the healing process where the sloughing is occurring. Yes, so this is absolutely normal, and for the tonsillar fossa to start appearing absolutely perfectly normal, you have to wait for 2 to 3 weeks. So around 3 weeks time, in around 3 weeks time following surgery, it will have a tonsillar fossa will have an absolutely normal appearance. Gradually with time it will improve, but don't panic if you see an appearance like this. Don't think that, my God, what has happened. Yes, so it will normalize. So that is what you needed to know in the tonsil. And yes, as I told you earlier also, each and every word of this lecture, of this as well as the previous module of tonsil and tonsillectomy is very, very important. Tonsil is one of the part of the pharynx which is repeatedly asked almost every year is a question on tonsil. Very, very commonly asked. Now sometimes you ask me that, ma'am, where should we find salivary glands? So yes, salivary glands, this is a note for you. Please note that the salivary glands as well as the tumors of the oral cavity have been dealt in great detail in surgery by Dr. Rohan. Yes, very beautifully he has covered it in 2 or 3 modules at great length. So to avoid repetition of the same thing has not been repeated here. So that is where you will find it. There is separate module on oral cancers as well as on salivary glands in his lectures. So please find it there. And that is all that you need to know whatever he has taught in salivary glands and oral tumors.